This video is a continuation of part of the story. If you want to know the full story, go first and watch the first part to know the events of the story. Please put it in the description or in a pinned comment, watch it, and then complete the story in this part. Or if you watched the first part of the story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Let's begin.
When Roxy finally pulled the doorknob, what she saw behind it was nothing a human mind could imagine. There was her own head, severed, dangling in the air before her, its eyes wide open, the smile on its mouth widening into a terrifying slit stretching from cheek to cheek. She heard a voice emerge from the head's mouth. It was her own, but strange, distorted, as if emerging from the bottom of a damp grave. "Why did you destroy us? Why didn't you respect the dead? You'll be sorry, Roxy. You'll be sorry." Roxy screamed, a scream that shook the walls of the apartment. She fell to her knees, gasping as if her lungs were constricting. She felt like she wanted to die at that moment, just to stop this nightmare. But suddenly, her instinct for survival ignited within her, as if her body had decided to fight until the very last moment. She slowly got up, her hands trembling, and headed toward the door, trying to escape. But the surprise was even more frightening than before. There was no door. The wall was smooth, completely empty. No door, no window, no way out. The apartment had become a tightly sealed tomb, trapping her with these entities that haunted her. She began screaming at the top of her lungs, a desperate scream, calling out to anyone who would hear her. But there was no response. There was no one, only the death walls and the echo of her screams. Then a strange face appeared in the middle of the living room. It wasn't a body, just a face, floating in the air, repeatedly banging its head against the wall until the blows left black spots, as if the wall was bleeding. It repeated a single sentence in a deep voice, as if it came from deep within the earth. "You did not respect the sanctity of the dead. You did not respect the graves." Before she could comprehend what was happening, her eyes drifted toward the television, which turned on by itself again. Her husband appeared on the screen, his terrifying smile wider than before, and he muttered intelligible words, strange sounds, punctuated by a tone that sounded like an ancient satanic ritual. Suddenly, Roxy felt a sharp chill behind her. She turned to see her mother-in-law emerging from the shadows of the corridor. She wasn't the same as she'd ever known. Her face was distorted, her eyes sunken in their sockets, but she was smiling a cursed smile, revealing black teeth that looked as if they had been rotted for centuries. The mother-in-law suddenly screamed, a sharp shriek that tore through the stillness of the place. All the walls shook and objects fell to the floor. Roxy clung to the wall, her body trembling, her skin turning pale until she looked like a living skeleton. The voices grew louder, faces approached her from every side, and cursed smiles surrounded her. She wanted to run away, to disappear, but nothing in her mind was able to think. At that moment, Roxy realized that she might never get out of this hell, and that it all started with the demolition of that cemetery. Roxy was screaming until her voice was hoarse,
thrashing between the walls as if trapped inside a nightmare from which no one could awaken. Her body was trembling, her hands bloody from repeatedly trying to open the wall that had just been a door. Everything inside her was screaming for life, her instinct for survival at its peak. She ran toward the hall, her eyes frantically searching for an exit, a window she'd never seen before, any crack she could jump through. Everything was silent for a moment before she suddenly gasped and stopped moving. There, in front of her, 4 bodies hung from the ceiling, swaying slowly like stage puppets. The bodies were almost rotten, dripping sticky black drops onto the floor. But the real horror wasn't in their bodies, but in their faces. They were all smiling broadly, as if mocking her, their eyes open, staring directly at Roxy. She screamed a long, drawn-out scream and fell to the ground. She tried to back away, but the bodies began to spin slowly, as if swaying to a hidden music. Suddenly, the lights went out. Everything fell into complete darkness before the light returned for a brief moment, a flash of light. In that flash, she saw the bodies, their bodies completely burned, black smoke pouring from them. The light went out again. It came back on, and she found herself looking at headless corpses, blood dripping like rain. Roxy screamed as she crawled backward on her hands and feet, her eyes widening. The light quickly went out and came back on, each time altering the scene. Mutilated faces approaching her, bodies torn apart, bones scattered on the ground, and burned faces whispering in a deep, overlapping voice. "Why didn't you respect the dead? Why did you destroy us?" The ground began to shake beneath her, and the sound of muffled laughter filled the apartment. Cold laughter that made her hair stand on end. She tried to cover her ears with her hands, but the sound was internal, echoing in her head. She screamed with all her might, "Why? Why didn't you respect the sanctity of the dead?" It was as if the whole place suddenly fell silent. There was no more light, no more sound, no more bodies. Just a heavy silence, as if the entire apartment was holding its breath, as if something bigger and more hideous was about to unfold before her. Roxy lay on the floor, her body trembling, her tears silently streaming, but she didn't dare move. She felt as if there were eyes watching her from every corner, waiting for her to get up, so the next round of horror could begin. When Roxy opened her eyes, she finally saw the door in front of her, the exit door that had previously disappeared. A spark of hope ignited in her heart. She staggered to her feet, but her knees trembled until she almost fell again. Every step closer to the door, laughter rose from every corner of the apartment. The laughter of women, men, and children, voices all overlapping as if celebrating her imminent fall. She reached for the handle, slowly opened it, and rushed outside. But what she saw made her blood run cold. Halfway down the stairs leading to the ground floor, there was a huge painting on the wall. She approached slowly, trying to control her trembling, then froze. The painting was a precise rendering of her own body, the same dress, the same hair, but her head was turned back, and her facial features were devilish, with a long smile that almost reached her ears and completely black eyes. Roxy stumbled backward, gasping, and fell down the stairs, then stood up with difficulty. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, but she kept going down. With each step she took, the echoes echoed around her, as if the walls were laughing. Halfway down, she saw another painting. This time, her husband was painted on it, his face distorted and two horns protruding from his head, holding a huge sickle dripping with blood. At his feet lay a pile of human skulls. She let out a long scream, then continued descending, her legs floundering on the stairs. She fell face down, then stood up, as if something invisible was pushing her down. She felt the stairs never end. Every 10 steps she took, she found herself in the same place, the same paintings, the same shadows watching her from the corners. A full hour passed as she descended into that endless hell, her breath ragged, her feet bloody, until finally a dim light appeared at the bottom. She ran with all her remaining strength, reached the main exit, pushed it open, and rushed outside. But what she found wasn't the real world. Her husband was standing there, in the middle of the street leading to the building, but this wasn't the husband she knew. His face was identical to the painting she'd seen, his eyes burning red like embers, and in his hand was a huge scythe with human skulls dangling from it, blood streaming down the ground in a red stream that reached her feet. Her husband raised his head toward her, smiled that devilish smile, and then began walking toward her with slow steps, dragging the scythe along the ground with a frightening metallic sound. Roxy felt her heart stop. She turned and ran back into the building, climbing the stairs at a frantic speed until her lungs felt like they were burning. She just wanted to get to her apartment. No matter how cursed it was the only place she knew. She finally reached her apartment door, opened it, and hurried inside. She closed the door behind her, panting, then leaned against the wall, her eyes shedding tears of fear and despair. She didn't know that entering the apartment again meant the nightmare wasn't over, but had begun all over again. Roxy arrived at her apartment panting, her hands trembling, and her tears still streaming from the horror of what she had seen on the stairs. She quickly opened the door and entered, but it closed behind her with a terrible sound, as if someone had closed it on purpose. For a moment, the air felt heavier, as if the apartment had never been the same. Her eyes froze on the walls. Everything was upside down. The furniture was scattered, the glass was broken, and the large mirror in the living room was completely shattered. The smell of blood and iron filled the air, as if the apartment had been a crime scene just moments before. Her heart began to beat faster when she heard footsteps approaching the stairs outside the door. Heavy, slow footsteps, as if they were coming from deep within the earth. Roxy unconsciously stepped back, her eyes widening with every sound from outside. She didn't know what to do, but her feet carried her to the bedroom where the old dresser was. She quickly opened the door and shrank inside, sitting on her knees, her hands covering her mouth to prevent her shaky breathing from giving her away.
A heavy silence hung over the apartment for a few seconds before it was broken by the sound of the door opening. She heard it clearly. Its creaking was slow, as if someone was enjoying the sound of terror it provoked. The entity entered the apartment, its footsteps moving deliberately slowly across the broken wood floor. It was searching for her. She could feel it, as if the very air announced its presence. The sound got closer and closer until it reached the bedroom. Roxy couldn't control herself, her tears flowing quietly, her heart nearly stopping as she heard the entity's breathing behind the closet door. Suddenly, everything stopped. A terrible silence. It was as if the world froze for a moment. Then, very slowly, the entity opened the closet door. Roxy saw his eyes first. They weren't her husband's, but dark eyes, burning a dull red like the embers of hell. His body was distorted, his head tilted as if broken, and a crooked smile revealed sharp, inhuman teeth. He slowly raised the scythe to her neck while she froze in place, unable to scream. But the scream escaped unwillingly, a deafening scream that shook the walls. At the same moment, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, bathing the room in a sudden golden light. The entity slowly backed away, its face beginning to crack as if it were melting. It made a sharp sound, more like the howl of a dying animal, then ran to the bathroom and disappeared inside, leaving behind a stifling, sulfurous smell. Roxy sat on the floor, sobbing, unable to believe she was still alive. Light enveloped her trembling body, and her eyes were fixed on the closed bathroom door. Suddenly, she lost all strength and fell to the floor, unconscious. Roxy woke up to a bright, white light hitting her eyes. The ceiling above her was completely white, and the smell of medical disinfectant filled the space. It took her mind a few seconds to realize she was in a hospital. She tried to move her body, but her arms felt prickling from the needles sticking in them. Slowly turning her head, she saw her husband sitting beside her bed, his face tired and his eyes red from crying so much. Beside him stood his sister and mother, both crying silently, as if tears were no longer enough to express what they felt. Her husband leaned closer, gently grasping her hand as if he feared it would break if he squeezed it. Before she could say a word, he said in a hoarse voice, "Enough. I know everything, Roxy." She looked at him with trembling eyes, as if her heart had stopped for a moment. He continued, trying to hold back the tears. "That building was built on top of an old cemetery. What you experienced that night was the worst nightmare a person could have, the worst night of your life, and I know it." His tears began to flow again as he spoke. The person who built that building was arrested by the police yesterday. He was sentenced to life in prison for building without a permit. And what's more serious is that he built the building on a cemetery without telling anyone. He knew what he was doing, and yet he didn't stop. Roxy felt a tremor run through her body, then collapsed into tears, her tears flowing like a river, remembering every second of that cursed night. The endless staircase, her husband's disfigured face, the blood-stained sickle, everything flashed back before her eyes at once.
Her mother-in-law reached out to pat her shoulder, trying to calm her, but nothing was enough to erase the terror from her heart. It was as if her soul was still trapped there, between the walls of that building that no longer existed except in her nightmares. Everyone fell silent for a moment. The only sound in the room was the sound of the medical monitors and muffled sobs. Her husband wiped his tears with his hand, then said in a low voice, I swear I'll sell that apartment. We'll never go back." But Roxy didn't respond. She simply stared at the closed door of the hospital room. Her eyes froze there, as if she saw something standing in the shadows behind it. At that moment, an unnaturally cold breeze blew into the room, and Roxy shivered for no apparent reason. The lights went out for a few seconds, and when they came back on, the door was half open. Roxy smiled, a trembling smile, tinged with fear, and whispered in a barely audible voice, It's not over yet." Everyone stared at her in silence, not understanding what she meant. But her husband felt a sharp shiver run down his spine, as if something or some entity was watching them from outside, waiting for the right moment to return. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. And tell me in the comments, what's the scariest story you've ever heard that kept you up at night? And don't forget, my Instagram account is live now for anyone who wants to send me their own scary story. Maybe yours will be the next episode on the channel.